There we go. Hi there. Be sure
Great.
to open the chat function so that you can participate. So let's wait until we have most of you here. That's the moment I should put some music, right? Some bossa nova. Do, 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 do. Okay, there we go. Now you this co-host, this is good. In case I forget to put someone in. All right. Mhm.
I wish I could have the lovely background like Nina, Aida, and Julio have, but it's not inclusive for curly hair. It really makes me look quite odd. So there's a note for the diversity and
It,
inclusion office.
it's tough, yeah. I remember that a hair of the color of Gudrun, right? Like a very like Finnish like white blonde. That's also tough.
Also,
Also,
okay, yeah.
I don't have this problem. That's my green screen's perfect. It's not even green's blue actually. All right, we are good to go. Welcome everyone to our sort of third session today. We had the introduction, then we had the session about programs, women programs in business. Do we still need it? Of course we do. And then there's the next question now that's coming up with Jamie and Eugenia, which is about the physiological aspect of women and businesses. Oh, this is a private thing. Is it really? When 50% of the humanity is affected by it, right? So I won't dive deeper into that. They will do it. Now for the technical aspects. If you do not understand anything that I'm saying now, you can go to the translation Button nearby there. Es gibt so einen Button, Leute. Da sieht wie ein Glöbchen aus, ein Welt. Und dann klickt man hier, dort, und dann hört man auf Deutsch beziehungsweise Englisch. Das gilt für die gesamte Woche. Gut. Now back to the English form. So, if you have questions, please write them in the chat. You can also use the Q&A function, okay? And we will send you the recording and the folio and the presentation, etc. slides in the coming weeks, okay? So no worries, no need to do anything on yourself because we make it very coarse, we cut it. All right, I've spoken enough. Now I'm going to give the word to Jamie and Eugenia. Ladies, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Julio. And thank you all for joining. As Julio mentioned, this is day one of a full week of programming. Delighted that you're joining us here today to talk about the three M's: menstruation, maternity, and menopause. Hope you're in the right place. So I am Jamie Glore. So I'm an assistant professor here at the University of St. Gallen. I work at the nexus between leadership, diversity, inclusion, technology, humor, and sustainability. Hopefully, some of that will come through in a tough topic like the three M's, because yeah, theoretically and practically, I think it makes it an easier topic to talk about.
Yeah, and I'm Eugenia. I'm a research assistant here at the University of St. Gallen and also a PhD candidate working with Jamie on topics like motherhood and leadership, allyship, and also other aspects of sustainability.
Great. Thank you to all the sponsors who make this happen. And now on to the content. All right. So hope everybody is ready. So when you see this picture, go to the chat and write first thing that comes to mind. What do you think? Take 10, 15 seconds. What do you think when you see this picture? Maybe you're thinking of Working in the office on a hot summer day, like today, is actually unseasonably warm for St. Gallen, at least. All right. Of course, your responses might be a little biased because you do know the title of this talk, but we're seeing many responses come in. We'll show you one more picture. Let's do the same. What's the first thing that comes to mind? What is this showing to you? Is it someone perhaps trying to calm their nerves or show respect in a presentation? What comes to your mind? All right. Great diversity of responses. In English and German, we're seeing respect, empathy, no idea, gratefulness, calm. I'm not even sure if I've seen the response that we had in mind yet, so we'll show you. You might have, many of you guessed part of the first one, right? So this is an image developed with GPT to show hot flashes. You might have also noticed that it's from GPT because the fan is actually backwards, a clue that it might be generated with AI. And the other one was actually an image of the cold shoulder. So our studies actually show us, next slide, Eugenia, that this is common hot flashes, for example, in approximately 80% of women and menstruating persons who go through menopause. They often feel these hot flashes. And although the cold shoulder, as it's called, is a little less frequent, only 10 to 20%, it's also quite common, right? 1 out of 5 approximately women and menstruating persons who experience menopause also feel this cold shoulder. And there's many physiological reasons why this might happen, but the idea with this exercise is to kind of show you how it might manifest in some work-related contexts. So thank you for your engagement already. We'll have a few more exercises, so keep on your toes. And one quick disclaimer that we want to make before we get started is that by its nature, this talk is kind of showcasing and outlining and explaining the physiological ways that women are perhaps different or unique from men and those who identify as men. So we wanted to caution here as a pre-claimer, so to speak, that we are going through this in detail to try to reduce the stigma, increase awareness and education about it. But as shown in other research by Hyde and others, of course, there are many ways that women and men are very similar. In the meta-analysis where they looked across all these studies, thousands of studies over many, many years, found that, you know, there were more similarities across men and women than differences, except when it came to, I think, how far they could throw things and how many pounds that they could lift. So we do want to have this disclaimer that we are talking about something that might be especially unique to women and menstruating persons, but we don't mean to other them in any way. Okay. So what we're talking about today, the 3 M's, they're called it for short, referring to menstruation. That's these premenstrual fluctuations and monthly periods. Maternity, the second M, so that includes becoming pregnant and all the bodily changes and hormonal changes associated with that, including everything also postpartum, like lactation, this is breastfeeding, or pumping. And then finally, also the last M, menopause. So that's, again, a hormonal physiological change that refers to not having the menstrual cycle for 12 months, so about a year. And they're ordered like this because that's, you know, the biological order in which they tend to come. But we'll rely a lot on this paper from Grandy, Gabriel, and King, recently published in Journal of Management, to show you a bit more. They reviewed the literature. I highly recommend it, and I'll give you the QR code to that at the end as well. So yeah, like I was just saying, this menstrual phase comes first and really overlays with this initial period when, pun intended, I suppose, when women are entering the first job in the workforce. There's various kind of hormonal changes that happen in the body. We'll talk a little bit later if those actually manifest in ways that we think they do in the workplace. but it often happens for about 3 to 8 days on average, dropping in estrogen and progesterone. Sometimes they feel a bit of pain, cramping. The maternity here, this age of onset is an approximate average, right, as we often talk about in research. But when you're thinking about highly educated group of women and people who identify as women and female, that it actually is a few years later, and this has actually been changing in recent years as well, that you're seeing an increase in, especially in the UK, actually, in women above age 40 that are having children. So it includes 40 weeks, of course, on average, includes lots of hormonal and bodily changes, and then postnatally lactation, and can take some months as well to physically recover from. And then finally, the menopause, like I alluded to, is kind of the third one in the chronological order. And it includes some hormonal changes here, dropping in estrogen, rising in follicle stimulating hormone. Could be this perimenopause, which comes first, kind of signaling some irregular cycles. And then, of course, once it's been documented for about 12 months or a year without having menstruation, it's said to qualify then as menopause. On average, affecting ages 44 to 51, and it, of course, only happens once, because once you've had menopause, you don't revert, at least as far as I know. I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a social scientist. But yes, I think that's good for now, to give you an overview of some of those physiological changes. Of course, not all of them, but we do want to focus especially on the social experience of these, because that's what is very important for understanding how these changes affect the workforce, the trajectory into leadership, but as well what we can do as coworkers and leaders to try to make this less of a taboo topic. So if you don't know these monkeys, they're the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil monkeys, and they're here to kind of signify or symbolize the taboo or the kind of stigma associated with these topics. And throughout the talk today, we're going to argue that these 3 M's, and because they're so taboo, because people don't want to, see it, they don't want to talk about it. I mean, thinking back in the United States, when someone got their period, we called it, oh, Aunt Flo is visiting, right? So there's all of these sorts of metaphors that you can use so that you don't even actually talk about the thing that's going on. And we kind of want to, our primary aim here is to kind of take away some of that stigma here by increasing understanding.
Super. And Jamie, talking about understanding, there was a question in the chat about what these 2.5 years mean here in the maternal column. Maybe, can you see my laser pointing at
yes, I think that meant that when there's multiple childbirths, so having multiple children, they're approximately 2.5 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
But again, these are averages. They depend on, education, because that's often later happening for older women. Yeah, was that the only question?
I think so far, yes.
Okay, and we're happy to take questions if anything is unclear as we go on, and hopefully have more of a discussion, especially at the end. So please make sure you're hanging on to those questions. And yeah, just to reiterate what I was just saying, many women especially feel like they can't even talk about this because it makes it seem like they're emphasizing gender differences, and that maybe it's even used against them. So we'll circle back to this in the end, how we can make it more of a workplace culture that can really allow for and even encourage, maybe even reward sharing some of these experiences. Okay, and so once again, we're highlighting here that it's not these actual experiences, because these are human experiences happening to millions and millions of people. So by the end of the session, we hope that you will be able to recognize some of these experiences and some of the taboo, that we can work together to normalize these as typical human experiences, but also work together in a compassionate way to try to support our colleagues and our leaders in making these recognized and normal things.
Yes, so now we will talk about how these 3 M's affect women in the workplace. starting with menstruation, which is more common with younger women, that it's affecting them negatively. So, for instance, we know that women in their 20s is the age when they experience most PMS, so these premenstrual symptoms and more cramping. And this is also when young women are starting their first job, right? So because they are starting in a new role, they will want to create positive impressions and build relationship with their coworkers. So probably they want to avoid talking about menstruation distress, as this could have a negative impact on these first jobs relationships. Then we have maternity, which typically occurs during early to mid careers. This is when full commitment for employees is expected. And we know that not all women decide, or not all women can be mothers, but still maternity-related challenges happen to all women, as we will see soon. And specifically, research tells us that for pregnant women and mothers, there is a backlash to them, right? So, for instance, when mothers or pregnant women try to get a job, they have less opportunities than non-pregnant women or fathers. Yes, and we also know from experimental research that usually pregnant women and mothers are perceived to be less competent, right, and are seen as less committed to work, which might explain this backlash that women face and mothers face. And finally, we have menopausal symptoms, which Jamie was explaining, that they happen mid to late 40s, right? And this is also during mid to late careers when leadership is also emerging. And we know also that there are stereotypes related with menopause. So, for instance, feeling that women experiencing menopause are more passive or more frail. So, because of these stereotypes, then probably that probably women are aware of that they exist, they will not be talking about these experiences. They will not be sharing these symptoms that they have, and also not ask for accommodations, like if you are very hot, asking for more air conditioning or an additional fan to their employers. And I think there was a hand raised. I'm not sure if we can attend to that. Or I'm not seeing it anymore, so we will continue, but please feel free to put the question in the chat. And in addition to these 3 M's, we also have other health-related challenges, right? So, for instance, infertility, the inability to achieve pregnancy, or miscarriage, the loss of a pregnancy, yes? And independently on whether women are planning to get pregnant or whether they have children, they also face this maybe baby bias. And I wanted to ask quickly in the chat, and you can just answer yes, no, if you know what maybe baby refers to. Let's see, we have some no's, we have some yeses. Super. So this is a term that Jamie and her co-authors coined to talk about these pregnancy expectations that individuals have of women who are in the age to have children, but they don't have children yet, right? And the idea is that because there is an expectation that they will become pregnant, then these women face more difficulties in getting a job. And once they have a job, they also face greater incivility from coworkers and supervisors. Yeah, so we can see that this maybe baby bias from women who are not pregnant, but just because they are at the age of pregnancy, they face this backlash. And also after maternity or after giving birth, women can also suffer from postpartum related problems such as postpartum depression, and also they might experience challenges when returning to work, such as maintaining a professional image when they are breastfeeding or having to go to different spaces in order to pump. And they may also face problems when trying to give birth to a second child, and they are unable to. This is referred to secondary infertility. Again, maybe some of this maybe baby backlash or facing miscarriage after a first successful pregnancy. And what is very surprising to me is that even if there is no maternity, like the women decide not to have children or they cannot have children, we see that even in those cases, women can face backlash because they violate the expectation that women should become mothers. Yes, so I think that this affects us all. And we also took this famous now image of the gender intelligence report that we will see on Thursday. How is it moving, if we are advancing or not? To visualize how this menstruation, maternity, and menopause accompany women as they go up in the career ladder. Of course, this is a simplification. It's not a linear process, but I think it's good to visualize. And we know that these three M's remain taboo for multiple reasons. First of all, they conflict with what an ideal worker should be. So there is the expectation that an ideal worker is someone who is completely committed to work and is working long hours. The ideal worker is someone who is available 24/7 and is always prioritizing work above everything else. We also know that these experiences are taboo because they are feminine by nature, and men and masculine experiences are usually the norm at work, right? So these feminine experiences then seem the exception rather than normal life stages. And finally, we also know that there is lack of knowledge and stigma associated with these symptoms. Associated with these symptoms. So, for instance, menstruation is still stigmatized. So maybe young women feel that they have to hide. And for instance, we hide our menstrual products when we have to go to the toilet instead of being able to be open about this. And it's difficult to change this in the workplace. But we have this asterisk here because on some of our research that Jamie is leading, we are trying to investigate how to make sure that mothers can leverage the skills that they gain through motherhood in order to signal good or their leadership skills. Yes, so we know that there is incongruity between woman and leadership, and this is especially true for mothers because it exemplifies femininity. But if women can highlight the skills that they are gaining through motherhood, like time management, listening skills, these can be used to mitigate, right, these incongruities and showcase that yes, that women can also be these ideal workers and amazing leaders. And also related with feminine experience, Jamie also highlighted that there's nothing more human than creating other humans, right? So we hear a lot on the news about declining birth rates and reduced fertility. And we also, on the other hand, have that there is a talent shortage of highly trained professionals. So probably the creation of other humans is also something that have organizational implications or societal implications that go beyond the individuals, the individuals themselves. So these three reasons why these remain taboo, right? The conflict with ideal worker, that these are feminine experiences, and the lack of knowledge and stigma. And because the first two points are difficult to tackle directly, today we will focus more on these 3 points. But before we wanted to put the poll, Julio, if you can help us and make you vote which of these 3 M's does your workplace top the list.
There you go.
Thank you, Julio. So it seems that menopause is winning. You have many responses, Jamie. So yeah, menopause seems to be the one where organizations top the list. It seems that maternity is a topic that is more common, right? But even though we also have some responses of
Yeah,
participants.
I'm still surprised. 14% say they don't talk a lot about maternity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there we go.
All right. Thank you, Julio. Thank you all for participating to get our pulse on the 3Ms.
Can you all see the results, or do I need to share results?
I can see it.
Yeah, I did already, actually.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
No, stop share. No, stop.
Okay. I think you can exit out of it and then it leaves. I think we have a question from Frau Becker. Did you want to use the audio, Frau Becker? All right, maybe there's a issue with the, okay. A misclick happens to the best of us. Okay. All right, so does anyone know who this is? You might get some context clues from the hairdo, right? This from a couple decades ago, and the piece of the American flag you can see in the back. So this is actually Sally Ride. Yes, a few are recognizing that this is a NASA astronaut. And it actually happened a few decades ago that Sally was going to ride a rocket into space for a 6-day tour. Of course, NASA has to prepare the spaceship for everyone. There's no Aldi in space, right? Don't give it all away for us, Nancy. I see you chat in the chat. But we're going to explore, yes, how it might be in broaching the topic of menstruation, because that was also one on the chat that was not talked about often. So let's see what happened to Sally Ride here. Eugenia, can you advance and let's hope the video works.
Ahora
I think we do have a sponsor here.
¿Y si se nos mete alguien?
Déjala protegida con la alarma de ocupación de Securitas Direct con cerradura inteligente. Porque ante un intento de ocupación, nos alerta si manipulan tu puerta para poder dar aviso a policía.
¿Y si tiene que venir alguien cuando no estamos?
Pues podrás abrir la puerta en remoto desde donde estés. Cierra la puerta a robos y ocupaciones con la alarma con cerradura inteligente de Securitas Direct. 900-903-783.
Remember when NASA sent a woman to space for only 6 days and they gave her 100 tampons. 100 tampons. And they asked, will that be enough? Cause they didn't know if that was enough. These are our nation's greatest minds. They are literally rocket scientists. They also tied the tampons together by the strings like sausages. 100 tampons. 100 tampons.
All right. So thank you for humoring us literally there with the tampon video. Some of you may have heard about that. Literally rocket scientists, so the stereotypical smartest people on Earth, right? And so we wanted to throw the question out to you. How actually for 6 days or perhaps for one cycle, how many tampons on average do you think a woman might need? This is clearly something that the rocket scientists of NASA had trouble with. I'm seeing 20, 25, 15 to 16, 36, 10. Quite a few numbers going on in the chat. So we did do some calculations here based on some averages that we could find. And it seems that on average, again, there's a range, but about 20 tampons, considering if there's a 4 to 6 day cycle, about 3 to 5 tampons per day, perhaps a similar number of pads, or perhaps even 1 cup if you're using a cup that's maybe a bit more sustainable, or none if they have period pants. I think they do have to use tampons in space though, because liquids will float around. So if you can advance, there we go. So just to break more of the stigma by understanding some more of these kind of facts, right? Women tend to have their period on average for 2 or 3 to 6 or 7 days. It occurs every 4 to 6 weeks, right? So that's on average about 13 a year. As we said earlier, menopause happens once. And while estimates for pregnancy, I think it's about 70% maybe of women, and the majority of those women who are pregnant, they're working while they're pregnant. So it happens a lot of people who are working. In talking about some of the other like little m's between these big m's, right? We talked about miscarriage and infertility. That is actually concerning about 1 to 6 people of reproductive age. And spontaneous pregnancy loss before the 20th week is actually what qualifies technically as a miscarriage, affecting approximately 25% of pregnant women. Now, this can often happen very early, before a woman even realizes she's pregnant. But yes, approximately 12 to 20% of all pregnancies. So it's much more common than is often thought. And then, of course, after actually successfully given birth, right, through the miraculous act of all of these conditions and genetics coming together correctly and sustaining through to a successful and healthy childbirth, about 1 in 10 women experience then postnatal depression within that first year. Some stats for Switzerland that I could find were, for example, that 82% of mothers with children at home, they're economically active, so they're engaged in some sort of work. This is very much increased from a few decades ago. I think this idea of this Rabenmutter, right, who works and also has kids, the idea that, ravens are actually bad moms, which busting that myth, actually, the research from the animal world shows that raven mothers are actually very good mothers. They will only throw one of the baby birds out of the nest if food is scarce or if it's sick, to kind of think of the whole group. So ravens are actually very great mothers. I hate that word is used in such a negative way here. But of course, you might know in Switzerland, there's also 14 weeks of paid maternity leave. Currently 0 for miscarriage, as far as we could tell, even though Germany, France, and the UK recently as well, they have some miscarriage leave and job protection. So maybe that's coming. Switzerland is often a little later in the uptake in terms of various types of treatments for infertility or miscarriage. And most mothers do return to work within 3 to 6 months or within 1 to 2 days for miscarriage, although there's not much data on this. And to bust a few more myths, so we just talked about this Rabenmutter, right? But there's also a few ways that the taboo kind of sticks in organizations around these 3 M's, because things like mood swings, right, that are thought to happen when women go through, for example, the menstrual cycle. There's already this kind of association in other research by Tori Breskel and others that women are more emotional than men, and that somehow this increases around their menstruation. And of course, we see that a lot in movies and TV shows. But when we actually look at the evidence, it seems that rigorous evidence tracking women and men's moods, for example, over 70 days. So this is really a gold standard study to try to test, like, is there actually differences in moods between men and women and when there's a menstrual cycle versus not? And they actually did not show these kind of stereotypical cycle fluctuations for women. And they also showed that there were similar fluctuations in general for men and women. So it seems to be at least casting doubt on this myth that somehow women are much more emotional or having more mood swings than when they're menstruating. And in thinking about leadership and gender and being emotional, you might have seen those big examples from just a few months ago, the bromance breakup of Trump and Musk, right? I mean, that was very emotional and very dramatic, and I don't think either was on their period at the moment. So just some counterfactual examples to the contrary there. There's another myth about cognitive performance, that somehow when women are menstruating, that they're more forgetful, that they've lost their concentration, that their cognitive ability has declined in some respect. There's also this word like mommy brain to try to refer to some of these same ideas that happen maybe after a woman gives birth. But once again, the evidence does not paint such a clear story of this, with 73% of studies reviewed showing actually no relation between menstruating and cognitive abilities, forgetfulness, or concentration. And even more recent work showed that there's no effects across the cycle. So one of these studies that measures women doing the same task over and over and over and over, including their cycle and times that they're not in their cycle, showing no effects. So some gold standard studies showing, once again, myth sort of busting here. I see a comment about PMDS. That might be premenstrual disorder syndrome, if I'm getting that correctly. And that is a version of where it's even more painful. It happens to a minority of women. I'm not sure about the studies on exactly that subpopulation, because that is like a fraction of the women experiencing menstruation. I mean, if they're feeling more pain, I could imagine there might be a greater likelihood of showing some of these symptoms. So I hope that answered the question that came in the chat. All right, so we're back to these two, remember? Who knows the answer to this first one? How many % of women experience hot flashes? Yes, thank you, Severin. Thank you, Aurelia. Oh, yeah, approximately 80%. So it's a range, but yes, on average. All right. And anyone remember the cold shoulder? Approximately how many % of women going through menopause? All right. I'm seeing 10 to 20, 15. Yes, exactly. So if you were in my class right now, I would give you all 6s. You would pass with flying colors. Thank you.
Super, yeah, everyone is super attentive. Thank you so much. We're going to move into thinking what can we do as employees in our organization. And first of all, one of the topics is normalizing this and educating others, right? So one thing that we can do is trying to raise awareness, right? And for instance, having campaigns such as awareness days about menstrual health and menopause, or having this type of online chats in your organizations, and also, of course, training, right? So training managers and human resources employees so that they are equipped to respond with sensitivity when other employees raises these issues, right? Then we also have sharing and storytelling to reduce stigma. So with our own behavior and what we ourselves tell and what we share, we can also try to reduce these topics not being taboo. So for instance, I am myself now undergoing a fertility treatment. This is why, unfortunately, tomorrow I will not be able to join you in St. Gallen for the amazing on-site day. But this is something that I do not share with everyone, but I do try to not hide, because I know that sharing my story and my fertility journey can also help some other women who might experience similar challenges. And finally, also, I thank you for the hearts. Open language in communication and discussions is also very important. So we can make sure that our organization uses clear and inclusive language. So instead of saying things like that time of the month to refer to menstruation or to saying women's health, we can use the concrete language of referring to menstruation and menopause by its name. And we also wanted to share this article on the time by Pete Avensky. He is the CEO of an American company. And he very clearly, or like very boldly, stated that the US healthcare system fails women and that employers need to step in. What he argues, or what he mentions, is that women have higher costs in healthcare in the US, and this is actually also true in Switzerland, where, for instance, more advanced fertility treatments are not covered by basic health insurances, or some are not even covered by the majority of insurances. So what Pete says is that it's important then that the employers can cover some of these or offer some of these benefits. And he says by implementing such policies, employers can ensure that women in their workforce have access to the care they need without the added financial burden. Yes? And this is all actually what he tries to make with his company. And he also uses his voice in order to raise awareness. So, for instance, in their Instagram, they also promote this National Fertility Awareness Week, National Infertility Awareness Week, to make sure that there's light on this issue of infertility. Yes, and you can all read this quote. And Jamie also looked about it, and she found that the next Infertility Awareness Week will be April 19th to 25 in 2026. So you can mark this in your agendas.
All right, thank you, Eugenia. And I am also fanning myself somewhat here. I should clarify, I am not having hot flashes. I'm not menopausal as far as I'm. No, it's just really warm, and I'm on the sunny side of the office here in St. Gallen. So in thinking about what you can do in terms of policy and programs, and we also saw a question in the chat. Okay, now that we know about the facts, really, what can we do? So moving more towards, Eugenia just talked about, how to talk about it, which is very important, right? If you claim the words, it can often reduce the stigma by slowly normalizing the language and the concepts behind them. There can also be, of course, policies and programs at the organizational level. So myself, done some research on parental leave. There could be some counterintuitive or paradoxical, supposedly, effects of these. For example, if you grant much more leave to women than to men, for example, that can increase this maybe baby effect that we talked about before, because the kind of expectations of risk or cost in employing and promoting a woman is then higher than a man. And yes, the question I often get is that, men do military service too, and they have to leave, but that's often much earlier in the work experience, or even when they're studying, right? So we've seen more and more organizations offering shared leave, or a broad policy even at the country level in many cases that can then be shared among both parents, or even granting more leave if the man or the male partner. They use different language, so it depends really on the country and the policy. Lactation policy is even rarer to find in some of these spaces, but Ali Gabriel has published a recent paper on this, if you're curious about that, offering spaces that are easily accessible to use for lactation. I mean, I remember when I was returning to work for an event, giving a talk in front of 50 leaders and executives in Munich. I had just had my son 3 months beforehand, and I worked ahead of time to get a space where I could put my pump, so that I could zip out and get that over with, so that I could head back to the event that I was organizing. But in the meantime, someone had just kind of taken over that space, pushed my pump to the side, and had a meeting in that area. So I could not pump as planned, and had to run out rather quickly when I ended my talk there. So it's really important to make sure that you have a plan in place, or a reserved space for this. St. Gallen has one downstairs. I'm very happy to see that here. But all too often we hear stories from women who end up, just pumping on a toilet in a bathroom, which is such a shame, to be making food for infant children in such a gross space. Then we see other health benefits. You might have heard a lot of tech organizations are starting to offer social freezing, fertility support, even menopause care. They're fewer and far between, and mostly we're seeing in some multinational companies. But given the war for talent, right, we're starting to see a few of these companies trying to really fight for professional women with some of these policies. Here's an example of miscarriage leave. We did mention there's nothing so far at the country level here in Switzerland yet. Doctors have leeway to give certain leave. So if they don't, ask for it. This is very important to make sure that women have the ability to take the time off if they need to. Not all employers are as flexible about that, but if you have the doctor's note, it makes a world of a difference in many cases. To make sure we get to everything. Here's some examples of companies like I just mentioned that are offering social freezing. Merck, for example, in Switzerland, has been really a trailblazer on this space. I also coached a thesis recently on social freezing, and she was looking at venture capital firms, especially in the UK. And I would mention their name here, but they actually told me that they faced a little bit of stigma from their colleagues for doing their thesis on this topic. So just so you know, this is a recent thesis and it was excellent. But basically, pointing to it as being something potentially valuable. They're trying to do it to stand out in the market, but it's really kind of a Band-Aid solution. It's often seen as, touted as something that increases options and enhancing autonomy, but rather reinforces the expectation that women just have to adapt their biology to fit to the workplace. And in many cases, women find out all too late that maybe they're having perimenopause or that they're not as fertile as they thought. And then it's already too late for social freezing anyway. So we know if this does happen to be successful, it needs to happen more in the early 30s than in the late 30s or 40s. I see a comment providing period products in the bathrooms, just like toilet paper. We see more and more doing that. St. Gallen is doing that as well. It was an initiative from the students, so thank you for bringing that up too. I think we can zip through these quotes. I want to make sure we have time for your questions. Yeah, and Eugenia, take it away on culture.
Yes, we also wanted to talk about organizational culture, so these shared norms and beliefs that are happening in our workspace beyond these formal policies. And one aspect that is important about culture is psychological safety, right? So do our employees feel that they can speak up about their needs and challenges without fear of having backlash or embarrassment or exclusion? Yes. And the idea is that if we promote this psychologically safe space, then employees are more likely to request for accommodation or to just share their experiences. We also wanted to talk about allyship. When we talk about allyship, we talk about employees who belong to a dominant or advantaged social group who are trying to support and advocate for other employees who have less advantages or less privileges. Yes, and this could be men engaging in allyship for women, white women advocating in allyship for women of colors, or employees without caregiving responsibilities advocating for employees with caregiving responsibilities. And we know from the literature that allyship can be very important in countering motherhood or menopause penalties. So, for instance, if we are in a hiring committee and someone says, actually, we shouldn't hire Anna because she's about to but because she's at the age of having children, then the ally could step up and say, actually, this should not be a reason for considering considering the hiring decision. Yes, and also research also shows that allyship can be key to facilitate the return to work. So, for instance, we have this quote from a participant in recent research from in WhatsApp that shared a colleague hosted an event for senior leaders at his house. It was an all-day event that he scheduled. I had to pump, and as soon as I brought it up, he immediately got a room that he sectioned off and was like, "This is gonna be your space. Whenever you need to take care of that, that's your space. Nobody else will go in there." Right, so a little bit the opposite of what Jamie experienced in that conference. In this case, the ally made sure that there was this space for this maternal duty. And we also have metrics and accountability. Yes, so organizations can have visible and tangible goals and measure and track actually who is taking parental leave, who is requesting for flexibility, so working from home or flexible work hours, and disaggregate this by gender, by role, by age, by department, right, to see if there are some also departments that might be lacking maybe because of like a poorer culture or a less psychologically safe culture. And it's not only important to measure, but also to hold managers accountable to to have these goals and to keep these metrics up to the standard that the organization sets.
All right, thank you, Eugenia. I've been trying to answer some of the comments as well in the chat as we go along. Thank you for all of your engagement and your questions here and sharing examples. We just want to finish off with a few examples that all of you can do just as co-workers, colleagues, maybe you're a leader as well, because all too often, whether it's about menstruation, about maternity, or about menopause, or miscarriage, infertility, some of these other related topics, right? People are afraid to say something because they feel like they might stick their foot in their mouth. That's what this image is supposed to be showing here. It's kind of like an elephant in the room that people dance around, but they don't want to say something because they feel like they might say or do the wrong thing. So we have some ideas here. Next slide, please. Yes, as long as we go with compassion, right, that is the way forward across all of these M's, right? So just asking broad questions. How are you today? Are you getting enough support? What can I do? Can I help with anything? If a person has been away for whatever reason, just welcome back. Many times people don't feel ready, or maybe they don't feel safe to share why they were away. If it was because of a miscarriage, for example, so you could just say, welcome back, how are you? And they can share on their own terms, right? But it's important because often if people feel like they don't want to say or do the wrong thing, they feel really awkward, and then the person ends up isolated, which can compound the grief they're feeling if they also had a miscarriage, for example. And sometimes knowing what not to say is also just as important as knowing what to say. Work from example from Sally Meitless's Harvard Business Review piece, which I also link in the end. They say, don't say things like, but you're so young, or everything happens for a reason, right? We hear this all too often from women who have had a miscarriage, for example, or who are struggling with infertility. And this is just not helpful. Even if it's well meant to try to make the person feel better, it doesn't. Especially that if you are less stressed, that might help, because that makes someone more stressed if you tell them to be less stressed, right? And again, that's kind of placing the onus on the person to solve these problems, which are often uncertain and in some cases, unfortunately, unsolvable. And finally, the last example here, wow, you don't even look like you were, pregnant or that you had a baby or anything, right? This, we need to just kind of avoid commenting on other women's bodies. I remember when I was pregnant, it must have been 5 or 6 months, and I was just walking in the hallway, and a colleague said, "Oh, hey, Jamie, you don't even look like you're pregnant from the back." And I didn't know what to do with that comment because that kind of meant like he was checking me out from behind, and he's a really, really nice guy, so I'm sure he didn't mean it like that. But it also made me feel like a little othered in terms of being different, right? So just steer clear of commenting on people's bodies. All right, so we're nearing the end here. We want to make sure you have time to ask questions, but we hope that in unpacking these facts, in trying to break some of these myths, and in trying to point to some of these best practices that we do have some research about, there still needs to be more research done on this, especially on menopause. A lot of you mentioned it's not being talked about in your organization. It's also, of the 3 of these topics, the one that's being studied the least so far, but there are things in the works. We hope you agree now that they are leadership issues. And we hope that you have thought of something or realized something that you can do to try to recognize this, right? To eliminate or reduce some of this taboo, because they only remain stigmatized and taboo when they're not spoken about, acknowledged, or discussed. Hopefully you can normalize them by using the words, right? Menstruation, maternity, menopause, acknowledging them and discussing them openly, creating those safe spaces where people can also talk about them and ideally ask for help when they need it, and hopefully show a need for policies so that organizations and leaders can have this at the organizational level, so it doesn't depend on these idiosyncratic deals of having to ask for it and maybe, if things are going well, getting it. And finally, ways that you can show interpersonal support, whether it's through allyship, whether it's just saying something and making someone feel welcome. So now, if you have questions or if you have another idea based on experiences, what will you do to reduce the 3M taboo? Thank you for your attention. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions. Daria.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, go first.
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much, Jamie and Argenia, for this insight. So I was wondering, what is your experience, or maybe also research on the differences in the continents when it comes to these 3M topics? Because I work for an international company, and I would indeed like to do more awareness work. But is there any research or experience on the differences on these 3M topics when it comes to the geographies?
Yeah, great question. So you might have heard there's a lot of changes now in the US, especially depending on which state people are in. So if you're involved in the US, that seems to be no longer as protected at the federal level and really up to the states in many cases. But organizations can still step in and try to establish some of those safe spaces and supports. In terms of Europe and the UK, it seems rather similar as far as I know. Poland, I think, has been having some similar issues as some of the Republican states lately in rolling back some of those protections. But in general, the most of what we know is about then Europe and North America. Eugenia, I don't know if you have any other insights from these other places. I know we do have a colleague in Spain who is working on it in South Asia. Some cross-cultural elements of what women as leaders might deal with and how that might be different specifically in those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dart. Good luck. Important work. I think I heard someone take their mute off, so it seemed like someone else had a question.
Jamie, hi, it's Debbie from Thriving Talent. Thank you both, and brilliant sources and knowledge there. My question was the same as Daria, actually, in terms of that other level of complexity when you're working across cultures. I know that a really good source to share that probably many of you have read or is the Erin Mayer, The Cultural Map. It's a brilliant book anyway in terms of cultural. So when, everything that Gudrun and the team do is around leadership as well, but it's a really good book to understand cultural nuances. And I follow her, and I wonder whether maybe she's starting to talk about this topic across cultures. So it's a great resource anyhow. I'll put it in the chat, the name, but it maybe it comes up on her podcast or some of her articles as well. So yeah, just to share.
Yes, thank you. Please share. But I would argue then across cultures, still establishing this safe space and role modeling that these are things that we care about, and we stay focused on this meritocracy and fairness regardless of these bodily changes. I think those should be things that generally work across cultures.
I mean, I think that there are, of course, cultures in which menopause, maternity, and menstruation is even more of a stigma, right? And sorry, we have a cat here. Say hi. Yes, but these are things that we will need to manage. And I see a question in the chat about how are lactation rooms, and if it's normal that how is privacy managed. At HSG, I think that this is managed quite well. So it's a room with a closed door, and inside there is also a fridge. And then there is this small thing that you can say, is the room occupied or is the room free, right? So
yeah, and I think that's really well managed. When I was at the University of Zurich, the option was also a room that was, private with a fridge for the milk, and it was comfortable and everything. But it was 10 minutes away from almost everybody's offices. You had to sign up for it in advance, and you had to get a key from someone else. So I think with all of those extra steps, it just makes it so difficult and taking so much time out of your day. So I would say as easy as possible, something like this setup that they have at St. Gallen is really well done. Any other questions, comments? I see some about cyclical well-being, empowering women to align with their changing needs throughout the cycle to support hormonal balance and overall health. Yes, I have seen some doctors in Switzerland, for example, that are really trying to pay more attention to that, because I think some women, even sometimes, especially in this perimenopause or menopause, are starting to think that they're having some. I had one friend who thought she was going through a burnout, and it turns out no, it was just, perimenopause symptoms that her doctor did not recognize, and then she was internalizing this as being something wrong with her. So I think that is something that a few doctors are really starting to pay attention to. Even my gynecologist is offering kind of a telemed, easy way to get some hormonal checks, so that you can at least have that information and share it with your doctor, or maybe rule it out as a potential reason, because I think it's so easy to check hormones. I mean, I'm not a medical doctor. I know medicine is very complicated, but it's an easy type of data to gather, I should say, and relatively low cost.
Yeah, so maybe we move forward.
Yeah. So thank you again for joining today for the 3Ms talk. There are more talks, the in-day tomorrow, but then also virtual talks Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Please join us. We've also prepared a curated list of groups here in Switzerland that are doing a lot. So GEMS for more gender education in medicine for Switzerland, Swiss Repro, which is a group based in Zurich, part of this URPP, this priority program at the University of Zurich on human reproduction. They're both interdisciplinary groups, with one part working on the workplace, but also thinking about fertility more generally from an anthropological perspective, a legal perspective. We've got some of the readings here by myself, by Alicia Grandy, this paper that we cited many times, as well as my TED Talk. I have a few jokes about maternity and how you answer that dreaded "what are you doing in 5 years" question, where employers are trying to get at your family plans, and it's a completely undiagnostic question. So please, if you take anything away from this talk, don't ask that question anymore. But yes, thank you so much for joining us, and please go forth and help us to reduce the taboo of 3Ms. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I would like to remember you that we have another sessions at 5 o'clock in about 2 hours. And it will also be about health, but in this case, how can companies be proactive in handling health situation in the business place? Cool. See you then. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, Jamie, Eugenia.
Thank you. Bye.